Okay, so we'll get started in just a moment. Thanks everyone for your patience.
Craft Advisory, which is an artist book press at the Facility for Arts Research, which is part of Florida State University in Tallahassee. And the facility houses several art projects that focus on collaboration and publication between artists. Small Craft Advisory began in 2009 and has produced works with many artists, among them with Katie Baldwin, who was an artist in residence at the center a number of years ago. The press strives to push the boundaries of artist books through collaborative editions. And Denise is also a professor of art teaching printmaking at the university. She is a book artist in her own right and also part of the collaborative Shift Lab, whose members Katie Baldwin, Denise, Sarah Bryant, Macy Chadwick, and Trisha Treacy produce collaborative books. That is a lot to juggle, to say nothing of the fact that she has young daughters during this crazy time. So it's going to be very interesting to hear about these projects, and I am so happy to welcome Denise for this session. If anybody needs closed captioning, you can activate that at the bottom of your screen, and I will ask you to put any questions in the chat, and I will help them get to Denise when we open for the Q&A. And at that time, if you want to unmute yourself, you can also ask a question. So join me in welcoming Denise.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to jump right in because I have a lot of exciting things to show you and talk about. Oops. I'm like, think I know what I'm doing with Zoom most of the time. Here we go. All right. So today I am going to talk to you about Small Craft Advisory Press, centered around this theme about matière, about touch and surface quality of materials. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of SCAP, show you some pictures of our space, then talk us through a little bit of that article that I sent out for all of you to read. If you didn't read it, don't worry. I pulled out some quotes and I'll talk about some of the pertinent points that will lead us through our discussion today. And then I'll jump right into talking about, I'm focusing on about 3 projects today, but if we have time, we can look at further projects. I have a bunch of things behind me, or if we have some time during questions and answers and there's some specific things you want to look at, we can pull them out. So I'm going to show some slides, but I'm also going to show some live books too, so we can flip through things as best we can in this era of no touching and social distancing. So Ronnie gave a great introduction to Small Craft Advisory Press already. We work with scholars and writers to create collaborative artist book editions and to push the tradition of the book in whatever way that we can. I'm always telling my students I think the definition of a book is something that has pages and something that binds them together. Whatever that is, it could be pieces of paper in a box, it could be a rubber band that wraps them all up. But some of these things that we're trying to think about are what makes a book and how can we push that idea. This is our building here in sunny Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, part of the facility, part of Florida State University. Our umbrella organization is the Facility for Arts Research, as Ronnie already told you. So I'm just going to walk you right into this building. This is a kind of a weird building. It used to be a science research, a cancer research center that we inherited. This is our first room, our big main room here. This is our press manager, Jay Fox, and our resident artist, Christina Lilly. We're practicing social distancing here, making books, folding pages. This is our main workroom. We do a lot of the work there, but here's our presses, 3 Vandercooks that do a lot of the work. I'd like to think they did the work on their own, but they really don't. A lot of times it's really exciting when we have all three of these running. Most of the time we have one or two running at a time, but this giant press here on the left is SP25, and then there's a 1521 and a Uni one. This is the other half of the press room where we have etching presses that we can do all kinds of print processes with those. The one I'm standing next to is a giant etching press that you can print about a 4x8 foot block on, or you print on a 4x8 piece of paper. So we think a lot about the possibilities. We're working on a project this week that we're going to print some large etchings on silk that we're going to fold down. Oh, now I've got all ahead of myself. We also include some non-traditional print processes like laser printing in our work. We like to think about combining the old and the new and using whatever media or process is important for our work. We're hoping to add some other things in the near future, maybe a risograph to add to our letterpress and our laser cutting facilities. So just a brief check mark or outline of the things that we've done. So founded in 2008, published our first book in 2010, and we moved into this current space that we're in right now in 2011. And we published 22 book arts editions in that time. We have a few more in the works right now, and I didn't count those in the list. We've supported 7 resident artists. I'll talk a little bit about our resident artists. They have been a third-year MFA student from the University of Alabama that we host for a year. They produce an edition here and teach some classes and participate in some of our projects. And the SCAP books are in collections nationally and internationally all over the country and different places around the world. So hopefully wherever you are, you might be able to find some of those books in collections. And if you are somewhere specific and want to know if we have anything there, just send me an email and I'll take a look and see what you can find. So here we come into, that's a summary. If you have more questions, let me know. But basically what we're going to do here is now move into a little bit about the article that I sent you. So Annie Albers wrote about, she is well known for her weaving. And in this book on weaving, I took this one chapter, Tactile Sensibility. And she describes the importance of material sensibility, specifically tactile sensibility. In a world where things come to us and we don't make them, she feels that we lost our chance to handle materials and learn about them through handling. So this article is really a call to regain that sensitivity, or also a call to educators. She's speaking about how to educate both artists, but also educate students on how to think about how we once used touch to discover the meaning of matière. So if we take a look at, and actually, let's see. This is a quote from the article. We touch things to assure ourselves of reality. We touch objects of our love. We touch the things we form. Our tactile experiences are elemental. If we reduce their range, as we do when we reduce the necessity to form things ourselves, we grow lopsided. So I want us just to, take a look at these two images. This one on the left is one of the images that is included in that chapter from Albers. And then this one here on the right is a prep image from one of our SCAP books, Lining. So we're looking at making images of rabbit fur here. So thinking about how we can take in the surface qualities of these materials through touch, through sight, especially in these times now of lack of touch and lack of interaction. So what is matière? Matière is the word now usually understood to mean the surface appearance of material, such as grain, roughness or smoothness, dullness or gloss, qualities of appearance that can be observed by touch and are not concerned with lightness and darkness. Again, I included a couple of images kind of hearkening back to what Albers has in her book, where she's included a whole series of images that make you stop and think about what how a surface looks, how it feels. And what she's thinking about is how in designing surfaces, what the different materials do to create that surface. So here we have two images that were integral in creating the book I'm going to show you in a minute. Lining, where we took up close microscopic images of different kinds of fabrics. So on the left we have felt, and on the right, I think that one's cotton. I'm not sure. Now I put it in there. Now I can't remember exactly which one it is, but one of the fabrics in the book. Just as only a trained eye and a receptive mind are able to discover meaning in the language of colors, so it takes these in an addition an acute sensitivity to tactile articulation to discover the meaning of that matière. So one last image here for us, one last pair of images for us to consider before we move on to think about books. This one on the left, this is a series that we used in the production of our project Fashioning. On the left is an antique dress with a flocked surface, and on the right is a rubbing taken from that surface. So really investigating what that surface is down to its core. What kind of marks is it making? How is it translated? And that is a really integral part of the book Fashioning that we're going to look at in a minute. So with that said, one of the things, I slipped a couple images in here. Ronnie wanted me to show a couple of things that are some of my personal work. And this is a series that I call Swatch. Sometimes I call it Swash / Matière, but it is a series of etchings that they're laser engraved multicolor etchings that investigate the overlapping of color, the texture of the ink on paper. And they were intended really just to be that swatches and tests and experiments. And what happened was I was most interested in the surface quality of these prints and how they related to touch, and I just wanted to touch them. But when you think about prints, they're hung behind glass. The tradition is that you don't touch them. I think a lot of print artists are really breaking open that tradition, but this series, this is how it started. But as I started thinking about it, I really wanted them to be part of the body. And so I created this series of garments that you take off the wall, these apron-like pieces that you then wear. So that those etchings were digitally printed onto fabric and then repeated across that fabric to then make it possible for the viewer to interact directly with the images. So these were on one side of the wall and the etchings were on the other. There's a close-up of one of the aprons. Okay, so that idea of thinking about cloth right next to the skin, the ideas sometimes from my personal work do filter into some of the things from SCAP and vice versa. The things we're exposed to, it's impossible to not have these things moving back and forth in kind of the conversation. And so the first thing I'm going to show you is this book, Lining, Skin to Cloth. And it is about the textiles right next to the skin. So how the line, usually I wear a jacket that has a good lining. I don't have a good lining in my jacket today. The lining that is inside of your jacket, the lining that's inside of a pair of gloves or a hat or something that is right next to your body. This is a project that we did with Lee Emma Running, now a collaborator that I have worked with for a long time. This book we started, I want to say it was 2013. I can't quite remember the exact date. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop sharing that. And I am going to switch cameras. So if you don't have this one pinned, go ahead and make sure that you pin me. Not those crazy stripes, not what we're going to be looking at. This is what we're going to be looking at here. So I have pictures of this, but there's something about actually working with the actual object that is so much more, I mean, granted, it would be best if you all were right here in this space, but not possible right now. So here we have lining, and it's housed in a wooden box with a living hinge. This is cut out of one big piece of plywood and lined with rabbit fur. And what we see here are images of the rabbit fur printed and onto the paper over here. Does this look familiar here? The image of our rabbit fur. And then what we have is an investigation. Here we go. Skin to cloth. And on each of these 5 pages, I'll read this in a second, but I want you to take a quick look at this. Move that out of the way. These are each an investigation about that different fabric that is lining the back of the paper. So here we have, this is silky solid peach fuzz, and it says, first remove the skin by boiling and freezing. The fabric or skin is brushed to raise a slight nap. Only sleep 45 seconds. So it gives you, this is a close-up image of this fabric, a microscopic image of that fabric cut out of that page. So this, here it can feel this fabric, it's interacting with this rabbit fur. A very surface tactile experiential book. There's not one right way to read this. You can close all of the pages or open them all up. I like to see sometimes the interaction between the pages. But here we have felt. And felt reads, the most like paper, fleeing and to prevent blisters, a couple of saints packed 4 boots with wool. Their movement and sweat made 2 pairs of socks. I also really love this moment right here where the rabbit fur interacts with the microscopic image. And so I want to draw your attention to this when we saw that microscopic image of the fur earlier, when we're thinking about Matière, and really trying to think about how that can be present in the book, and how it is present by removing that bit of fabric to create that image. Next, we have Charmeuse. Charmeuse, the larva that gave the world the luscious swish of Dupani, is often forgotten, but the white silk charmeuse tank top and winter white trousers she wore are not lost to the rabbits. This is shiny. The next one is knit, a woolen sweater worn by fishermen from the Isle of Jersey. A side is right and one is wrong, made to order for extremities of all sizes, on a needle bed with 1 set of needles. So here we have a jersey knit. And the last one, ripstop nylon, a replacement silk for parachutes packed by hand during the war, made strong by reinforcement threads, tailors a less fine wedding dress, but will not fail under stress. And this is a book that just screams to be touched. A lot of the rabbit fur in itself is something that gets stamped in your memory. This is a book that when the students look at it in special collections, they always describe it as the rabbit fur book. So I'm going to take us back here for a minute. And I want you to see, I put this one in here just so you could see it up close in case you couldn't see that hinge, or the that little bit of fur kind of sneaking up through those laser cut holes. I also included this image here because this project expanded well beyond SCAP and really began the collaboration I have with Lee Running. And this is a project called Sheathing, which is, we took a lot of the ideas that we began thinking about in lining and expand them out in a larger scale. So sheathing is about protection and protecting the body. This is a large tent-like structure with printed textiles, and there's an embroidered blanket inside. And then there's a series of prints that go along with it. And there's also, I don't have an image of this, but you can find this on the website. There's also a set of jackets that have rabbit fur pockets that the viewers can wear. But this whole kind of idea of sheathing the body and more for protection. Right, so that leads me to, I'm going to take you through another book that years later we also did with Lee. And I tell my artists that if we sell out their edition, we can invite them back and do another edition. And actually, lining is the only edition that we have sold out. And so we sold that edition and then invited Lee again to create this book, Fashioning, which relates a lot to the things that we're talking about with surface quality, Matière, seeing the surface. And I'll show you that in just a second. But before I do that, I'm going to show you a short video of this piece, because this one is hard to show you even with the live camera. So I want you to see this.
Hey, Denise, I don't think we can see the video.
Oh, you can't see it?
No. Can you try
Okay.
resharing?
Yes, hold on. I did a different thing where I probably just didn't click the right thing. Let's try it again. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Wait, let's start it over here. Can you still see it in full screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. There we go. So this book is a book that you actually wear. You insert your hands into it and it becomes part of your body. And the way that you view it, you have to move your body in order to experience the book. Your fingers are busy, so you cannot. I'm just gonna play this one more time just so that we can see the movement of the book. This is a book about seeing a texture, about experiencing a textile and a texture through sight. Your fingers are busy. You cannot turn the pages. It requires you to use your eyes to experience that surface quality of the textile. I don't want it to play anything again. Hold on. Good. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you, I want to talk just a little bit about how this book was made. Oh, sorry. Okay, so here we see some images. But basically what we did is we took some garments and we took rubbings of garments. These garments were both in my closet and in Lee's closet and had some kind of personal connection to them. And we brought a whole bunch of them together and we started out with this pile of garments and we weren't sure what we were going to do with them. But after a while, we started thinking about rubbings as a way to translate the texture of those garments and preserve some of the quality of what it was that made us remember why we enjoyed that garment or loved that garment or kept that garment. So we did a series of rubbings that expose the inside of the garments and the surface quality. So even in this article, when we're reading about, she talks about the surface quality, but also the internal structure. I like to think about all of those things and how those things are all working together in a garment to make it function. And so in this case, what happens on the pages is that we're representing a little bit of both the surface quality and a little bit of the interior of the garment. So we printed these in white on white paper. It's just an image of one of the plates. And then they were dip dyed in purple. We were really interested in thinking about treating the pages like a garment. They even have folded up hems on the edges like a garment would. And I'm going to come back to this image, but this is a glimpse into the project that grew out of fashioning with Lee. This is a project we're still in the middle of. We call it tailoring. And it also is about garments and the structure of garments and the marks that they leave and thinking about all of the hands that went into making them. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the actual book for a minute. Here we have lining or fashioning, and it is housed in this large box, referencing a little bit of a garment box. And again, you reach into there's a hole, there's a space here where your hand goes in and a space here where you lift and then can view this book. So I realize this is also a very hard way to view this book. But one of the things that you can see, it has little tabs that hold the pages together that allow them to flap open as you investigate each one of those textures that are represented by each one of those garments. And then we were able to take a rubbing from the front and from two parts of the garment, essentially making the front and back of a textile. See some ruffles and embroidery, but the thing that is most important here is that it does become part of your body, but also that you need to use your eyes and your sight to really experience that textile. So that is fashioning. Okay, so the next project that I'm going to talk to you about is the Florida Sandhill project. This is a working title. This is a project completely in the works. We haven't, we've been working on this for a year, but we've been working on it a year because when we were supposed to really start it, COVID happened. Our artist, Nora Poolwall, she's an artist from Oakland, California, and she was going to come here and we were going to introduce her to the Florida. Here's some images of some of her work. This is from her webpage. She works a lot in etching and with urban plants. And we were going to introduce her to the Florida landscape. This was the plan. And she was unable to travel. It was the very first week of the shutdown for COVID. And we put the project on pause, and then we didn't know what to do with it. And one of the reasons I included this project today is because I think artists all over the world, or everyone all over the world, is trying to figure out how to do the things that they used to do, or how the things that they used to do are changing. And we were very excited about this project, so we decided to continue with this project with some alterations. So also included on this project is a poet here on the left. Sandra Simons, and then Paul on the right, Paul Russo, he's a botanist. And so he took us around some really unique places around Tallahassee, the Florida Sandhill ecosystem. So we went out there and he took us around and told us all about the plants, about how they're regenerated by forest fires. We took videos for Nora. We tried to FaceTime Nora too, so she could be there. But in general, what we ended up doing is taking photos, pictures, and collecting her plants. And we sent them back to Nora, and she started working with them in her studio, creating what we were trying to tell her about this place. So it becomes about a place where she cannot touch. We have to send her the material. She can't experience this place, but she can experience it through what we send her, what we tell her. And so the book is so becoming even more about that dialogue than just about the Sandhill. And so this is one of the first test prints and just a very early glimpse of some of the things that we're going to be doing. We're actually doing some test prints tomorrow. So we're very excited about that. And we're really looking forward to seeing how this project progresses and looking forward to the day that we can actually introduce Nora and the entire team to the Florida Sandhill. Okay. The next project I'd like to talk a little bit about is the Oyster boat project. So a lot of these projects you've seen, we work with small groups of people. And one of the things that we're interested in is starting to expand who we can work with and how we work with people, work with artists, and to be able to work with them faster or quicker. A lot of the projects you've seen have taken 2 to 3, maybe more years to do. Can you see this? It says Oyster Boat.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a short introduction to this project, which allows us to expand our collaborative practices to more artists and also make something a little quicker than some of our really complex artist books. So this is just a couple minutes. Oyster Boat is a series created and published by Small Craft Advisory Press in Tallahassee, Florida. Small Craft Advisory Press is a collaborative artist book press at Florida State University. We work with artists, writers, and scholars to create small editions of hand-printed and bound artist books. Our name connects us to our region, the Gulf Coast. Many mornings, the Coastal Marine Weather Report includes the Small Craft Advisory, which warns small boats of hazardous conditions along the coast. SCAP is named after this warning. SCAP's publication, Oyster Boat, explores one way to collaborate where people pass something to one another. To begin an issue, we ask our collaborators to send us fragments that are valuable to one's working practice, but incomplete. The fragments are an invitation to experiment and respond. Video, audio, objects, text, images. The Oyster Boat issues don't have individual titles, but are simply one possible way to respond to another's fragment. Each issue is about exploring collaboration and experimenting with books as a structure for ideas, resulting in one of many possible solutions a collaboration can take. All right. I feel like they always want to keep playing something else next. So I like to make sure that that is finished before I move on to the next thing. So Oyster Boat has been really exciting for us, and it's allowed us to really expand the artists that we're able to work with. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the Oyster Boats. There's 3 that aren't even, maybe 2 that aren't even up on our website yet. We have one that we just finished copy of it today. So I think we'll start with that. So here we go. I love the scale of these things. Obviously, these are much smaller than our books that we just looked at. But the beauty of these projects are that these are printed in-house. So we can work with someone who is a printmaker or not a printmaker, a book artist or not a book artist. But basically what we do is we invite the team to come together and they become the crew. So here we have Diamond Ford. She's a poet, and Beth Sheehan and Christina Lilly, who is our current resident artist, and Jay Fox. And so everybody who participates on the project is part of the crew manifest. And usually we see the visiting artists are listed on the front. So this is the newest one that we have. And this poem Diamond wrote right at the beginning of the pandemic. And it is about anxiety and about taking anxiety medication. And it has this other side to it that as you start to flip through it, you start to see these chaotic, more bright images happening. So, and the poem is very anxiety driven. And I hesitate to read the whole thing only because I am not the poet. And I do think that poets themselves read their work out loud the best. Ooh, I'm missing a little page there. But one of the things that I love about this book is the moment here, and then as you start to flip through it. So that's the newest one. These are done in much smaller they're done in editions of somewhere between 50 and 70, and they're much quicker books to produce. So they also are much more reasonable price point compared to some of our other artist books that that we produce. So we have found that people who really enjoy one, you can buy one copy and enjoy that. We also sometimes sell them for a whole volume. We put those into a box set. So like this is volume 1. So volume 1 is this set here that you saw in the video. So we have with Lisa Bowalski, Ann Hamilton, Sandra Simons, that we're also working on the project right now, and Michael Rothenberg. It's a great way for us to get to know an artist, a writer, a scholar, and then see possibly we might end up doing even a larger project with them. But it also allows us to produce something that isn't as precious or can be produced quicker. So maybe a student who might be working on something can actually see the beginning and the end of a project. So this is Lisa Bowalski's, and the crew manifest here is Lisa Bowalski and Alicia Mann. Alicia Mann was our press manager at the time and really helped dream up this project. Oyster Boat was one of her baby projects, and she really began this project here at SCAP. So we're open to all kinds of processes with these. I mean, you'll see even here, I love this moment where we have a editioned coffee stain. It's literally a coffee stain here in the book. And we printed on lined paper, and there's a fold out pop-up map here in the middle and a taxonomy of the mark list here in the back. So obviously this may be how an artist might think about finishing that idea, but it's just one way to think about these fragments that come to us. Ann Hamilton worked with myself and Alicia Mann, and she sent us these book fragments. If you're familiar with some of her work, These are those chopped up book fragments, and we played with them with language. There's light colored yellow text that is pulled off some of these fragments and then woven into the paper. I love that it breaks through the paper and becomes front and back. Let me get to this surprise here in the middle. Which we may need to zoom out for. But a large printout of one of those pages. Printed on newsprint to try to reference the same kind of paper that these little book pages were printed on. This is one of the examples of a book that was done by students. So our student interns at the time worked with Michael Rothenberg about, he had a poem written about a lake near here, Lake Jackson, and it disappears into a sinkhole every 15 or 20 years. When I moved to town, they were calling it the former Lake Jackson. It has since filled up, and it is an area that they are trying to conserve. So the poem is about the conservation and the ecosystem. And then we start to see bits of trash that they found in the area. And this was great. The students that made this, they even presented it to the Lake Jackson conservation group one day at their meeting. So it really connects to our local place, but was also something that they could complete within a semester of the time that they were our interns. The last one in that series is Sandra Simons, and she was working on a book that has now been published, Atopia, about kind of chaotic not a utopia, but an atopia. I'm not totally sure that's even a word, but she gave me the fragments that didn't make it into the book. And so I worked with those and created this book that has perforated sheets that you can tear out and rearrange. And it's hard to see in this picture, but there's some array patterns printed on the pages, really light behind the text. And when you get the book, there are pages already missing. And you're encouraged to tear them out and move them around. And I found actually it's interesting that when I take this to poetry readings, the poets are much more willing to tear them out than the artists. Right. So going on to volume 2, we have Chris Cardambekas. He came to visit for our lecture. Oh, look, I even have the pages out of this one already. I probably was showing someone. But this one, he worked with a whole group of advanced students, and he talked to them about his work and about this. He worked a lot with, this is about space junk and astrology. And they each wanted a moment in this book, but wanted to also use his drawings and images and talk about the books that he's currently making. And so each of the students had a different planet that they designed a kind of tarot card for, and they go into these slots and can be rearranged at will. And this book is a giant accordion. I like this moment here on the front. We try to do a little bit different, something different with each of the covers. Let's see. We have one left to look at. This one is with Frankie Flood. He's a sculptor, jeweler. He lives in North Carolina. And Jay went to visit him, and he's really interested in machines and tools and building. And when he went there, there are all these car manuals that he saw. And so he got a whole box of these car manuals. And although with the instructions given in this manual, you can develop an adequate maintenance of the vehicle. And there's pictures and schematics printed on here, which may be a little bit hard to see in this light, but which undoubtedly will increase its performance. Nevertheless, the necessary technical assistance should be forecast. Operator's manual. And I love this structure. It's like an operator's manual that you just carry around and just fold it up and put it in your back pocket. So that is all the Oyster boats up to date, and we're excited about continuing this series. It's been a really fun one, and a way to get a lot of different people working with us. And it's funny, Sandra just texted me because we're supposed to meet her. She's one of the artists here on Friday. Popped up on my screen. Let's see. I'm sorry, I just saw that switch to me. I know it was pointing somewhere else. Let's see. I can show a couple more things if we would like to, or we can, Ronnie had asked if I would talk a little bit about, Shift Lab, if we can talk about that if we'd like to, or we can also, there is one book that I really enjoy showing.
Show it.
You want to see it? Let's do,
Yes.
you know what? You mentioned Katie Baldwin. Let's look at the one we made with Katie, because it is really a great book. And I think it doesn't get looked at as much because it is more complicated than some. But here, let's see here. And I'm not sure, let's see. Okay, so this is Lake Cloud. And this one we worked on with Katie Baldwin. It's one of our earlier books. And it is about the expansive experience of reading. And what it is that there's a booklet and then 2 parachutes that are inside these packets. They unfold to be a giant, and this isn't going to be as effective. Here, hold on. I'll show you. I'm going to switch this for 1 second. So you have a blue parachute. I love showing this book because it's so ridiculous. And then over here, yeah, this is a much better way to show this. I'm sorry you can't see my head, but this is the way that this book should be used. Here is the white parachute. And the idea is the book, which I'll show you in a minute, the pamphlet that is in there, is that you would take this white parachute and you would throw it over something. And now I have my cloud and I put this on the floor, which you won't be able to see, but I'm going to throw this on the floor, which always irritates librarians when I throw things on the floor. But now I've made a lake and a cloud, this idea that I can make a space out of a book. This idea, that is what reading is the creation of those ideas and turning those things physically into something in your mind. So the expansive experience of reading. So let's take a look, take this off of here, off of my books, and we get to put those away afterwards. There are directions how you put it away, but I'm going to take you back over here, and there's little envelopes that have directions right here how to fold it. But the book itself, let's see, right here, it goes through how you use this lake cloud. In the library, they are reading, amending, pretending, and sowing the land and sky. Trace, cut, sew, trim, rise in a moment, fall for a year. She tried to make a lake of his book, chicken, chair, and she tried to make a cloud of the hay, ladder, fish dinner. So here's the fold out that shows you exactly how to use your lake and cloud. I don't know if you can see all the parts of that. You can cover your boot to make a lake, or your motorcycle to make a cloud, or your fish, or your hay, or your fish dinner. Small as a boot, pear, chair, large as a boat. Fold, 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 fold. Remove the space between things and collapse the lake and cloud. So on the cover here, we have the lake and the cloud. This one's 3D printed cloud, and this one's a laser engraved little blue lake. Let's see. And if we have a minute, I do want to show one more. I saw that Macy, one of our artists, is also on. And this is a lovely book that we did with Macy and our resident artist at the time, Sarah White. And also AB is on too. AB was our press manager and an artist on this project. So Flashpoint is in this black enclosure, and it's Flashpoint, arranging chaos. So this is about 4 artists working together to try to understand some complex thing. And so each of the artists chose something in their life that was chaotic and tried to simplify it into pattern to help them understand it. So Macy chose patterns of thought. I chose patterns of sleep. AB had patterns of fire, and Sarah White had patterns of flow. So you'll see the images are printed on the inside of the pages, and the text is printed on the outside. So all these things start to interact. And each artist has a color. So it becomes a conversation about arranging chaos. There was a set structure for the text with each artist contributed a list, a set of words, 2 lines, and a short stanza that then gets spread out throughout the book. But you can tell the voices of the artist based on the color. So at the time, my twins had just turned 1. So I was measuring, for a month, I measured how often they slept. And so the purple here is these rings about the hours that they slept. And Macy was thinking about thought. So she has this series of patterns of thought. So she has this series of brains that if you look deep inside, the different brains are doing different things and thinking about the patterns or showing different ways, different pathways of thought. And this laser cut image here is the pattern of fire that becomes beautiful and complex and rhythmic as you go throughout the book. And then the pattern of flow, the river that breaks it all apart throughout the whole book. And we encourage the looking in between the pages and kind of investigating those moments that happen between the pages, in between the thought, in between the chaos. And it's housed in this handmade paper wrapper, thinking of soot and the flashpoint as the moment, that one moment that it all kind of makes sense. Right. Well, I think, Ronnie, should we open it to questions, or is there something else that I didn't mention Shift Lab. Another project that I work a lot on is my collaborative that Ronnie introduced at the beginning. I do have some of those books. I have only 2 of them today. If we want to take a look at those, we can take a look at those, but I think questions first.
So if people want to put some questions in the chat, I'm gonna start off with a few questions. Denise, when you began Small Craft Advisory, what kind of idea did you have about it? And can you talk a little bit about, one, do you invite the artists, or how do they come to you? And over the course of time, how do you think the publications have changed or evolved?
That's a really good question. So when I started it, back when I was a new professor here, I was looking for a way to bring people to Tallahassee. It's not a place that you just pass through like New York. People just come to New York. So I was interested in how could I attract more collaborators to Tallahassee. And I was interested in printing and books, and it seemed a natural fit to try to start an artist book press. And honestly, I wrote some grants and thought everybody would say, oh, this is just crazy. And they didn't. And presses appeared before we even had space to put them. And I started it out really not knowing what I was doing. And I think if I knew some of the trials and problems and, difficult parts of it, if I thought about it too much, I might not have done it. But because I just did it and tried to figure it out as I went, it happened. And one of the ways that we invite artists are a lot of times they are curated projects. So I put together a team of artists. So I'm always paying attention and looking around for artists that are doing interesting things and try to figure out where they might fit with the team, how they might fit with a scholar or a writer, because all the projects are collaborative. And we don't start with an idea. Once the team is put together, the team works on the idea. And so I think of it, the seed is planted at SCAP, and that's where it grows. One of the things that we are thinking about now is really trying to expand that audience. And I think Oyster Boat is starting to do that. I think it is difficult to change quickly when you're working on projects that are 2 and 3 years at a time, or respond to something that is very timely. And I think those things are really important. And Oyster Boat has been able to allow us to expand our network of artists that we're working with. We're hoping to put out a call for the first time, possibly this spring. Because again, we're also interested in really expanding that our artist network and who we're able to work with. We feel as a publishing place that it is our responsibility to reach out to underrepresented artists. And we have something that we can offer them. We produce the work. And I think it's important to be able to find those artists and to work with them. And so that is one of the things that we're really striving to do is to really expand our audience and have some calls so that we can reach some different artists that we haven't been able to in the past. So
let me just ask you, does the Facility for Arts Research, I mean, do they provide the financial backing for these projects? I mean, when people come, do they give them a place to stay, or how do you get them to come? Do you pay
yeah.
them for their interaction, or do they get books? And then there's a bunch of questions from other people, but if you can answer that, then I can ask these other questions.
That's a great question. We don't want our artists to pay for the work that they're doing here. So if they come here, we pay for them to come here, we pay for them to stay. Usually we have a small honorarium. It's not a large honorarium, but we buy the materials and we do the production. Sometimes artists might do a little bit of production in their studio, but we try to do as much of it here as we can. So the books are supported by the sales of books. The future projects are supported by the sales of the books, and that goes directly back into projects. My salary is paid by the university. The press manager is paid by the university. So the press doesn't have to support that, and our space is the university's space. So the money from the projects can go back into it. And I think it's important that that is the structure that we maintain. And that we are really giving something to the artist, like instead of taking from the artist. And I know there's lots of different ways that publishing happens. And that's just how I feel really strongly about doing that.
David asks, what is the edition size of lining and how do you reach out to collectors?
So the edition size of lining is 30. And lining is, we might have one copy left. It's, but fashioning is available. Fashioning, the purple one that you open up with your hands, that one is also an edition of 30. We sell our books through Vamp and Tramp and also directly through the press. And I have to say, I looked at our website this week and it's having some major issues. It was fine last week. And I think our university is working on something. So we have a website, but it's very confusing at the moment. So I would say, can I put a direct message in here? I'm just going to put my email in here, that if you have interest in any purchasing of the Oyster boats or any of the other books, or if you want to forward it on to anyone, I can send prospectus and information. There are images on the web, but right now there's some issues with the navigation through our website. So I do sincerely apologize for that. You had mentioned you wanted the links for the videos too. I have those links. Somebody said in the chat here, this is the link to fashioning. And this is the link to the Oyster boat video. I feel like I had another link that I wanted to share with you. But yeah.
Somebody also, Judy said she was intrigued with the fabric rubbings and wondered what paper and rubbing tool were used.
So we just used a litho crayon and we rubbed, for the rubbings, we actually made them on tracing paper. It seemed the best to use. And then we scanned those in and output those as negatives to make photopolymer plates. The thinner the paper, the better really for that.
Jen says, do you find that people working in book arts tend to begin and work through their projects in a methodical, researched way? Or is there an impulsive experimental element to this way of working?
So that's a good question, Jen. I think that sometimes here we are rather impulsive and experimental because we might have a limited amount of time to create a project. So in normal situation, a visiting artist may stay with us a week, and there's large spurts of work that get done during that time. And we also don't have a clear idea. Sometimes when people show up, we don't know what we're going to make. I do like to have some sense of order as we move through a project, but when we start, we don't know. So they really can move in a lot of different directions. And I believe Jen, it's nice to see you, is one of my students, and she does know that I really do insist that we make dummies and work out sketches and have plans. And I have had some times where maybe we haven't made a dummy and then printed things upside down. I mean, this happens to everyone, but the planning and bookmaking for such a large project, there does need to be some planning and order, but it is nice to be able to embrace the experimental too.
Can you just walk us through, since you just said that the artist might be with you for a week, is that like a week for the whole project, or do they come back and forth?
So it really
And if
depends on the
not, like,
project.
can you kind of walk us through, like, okay, they come for a week, you make the dummy, then you proceed to finish it, or how does it work?
So a lot of times we start a conversation and have many, many conversations over Skype. So we're really used to having online conversations with our artists way even before all of this started, because we have limited time in person, and because once they come here, we don't actually have an art store here. So we have to order a lot of the materials ahead of time that we might be working with. So we do have to have a little bit of planning before they come. And usually our budget allows us to have an artist stay for about a week. Usually that also is what an artist is able to do. Sometimes, a lot of times they might be an academic or they have another job. And we usually do visiting artists during the school year so they can also interact with students. So we do as much as we can in a week, and we may invite an artist back for another week. We also will continue the conversations over Skype. So we do a lot of production when the artists aren't here. So we might do a lot of planning and dummy making while they are here, and then we do more editioning and production work once they're away. And then we're constantly checking in, and because there's a team, it's not just the artist that's here, it's us, it's the scholars, there's other people, there's quite a large team that to keep up with with each of the projects.
Karina says, it seems like you have a strong interest in the intersection of textiles and books. Can you talk more about the ways you feel these two genres are related and why that's important to your publishing practice?
So I think one of the things that you see today, I did pull out a lot of the books that had related to textiles, and I work a lot with textiles in my personal studio practice. I have an affinity to textiles. I like to make prints that are about textiles but aren't textiles. So you saw the plaids where they're about textiles, but they're not textiles. So I think about a lot of times a textile is very similar to a piece of paper. You can manipulate it a lot in the same way that you can a piece of paper. So I think they have a true affinity to each other. I think today, one of the things that I was really thinking about was the surface quality of textiles and paper, and how those two things really speak to each other. So yeah, but we do all kinds of different work. I did say we were printing on silk. Yeah, there's a lot of textiles. I do admit, I'm trying to think of a project that didn't incorporate any textiles. I didn't show you any of those. Maybe Flashpoint. I don't think Flashpoint had any textiles in it. But I like to think that our projects are all really different. The two that I showed you today, Fashioning and Lining, they have a lot of affinity to each other. They're by the same artists. And they're really we did the one, and then the second is the follow-up. So, or the next iteration. So one is really speaking to the other. And so that's why I think there's a real strong, I think there's a really strong connection between those two books, both in size and content and their attention to textiles and touch and materiality.
Regine wants to know if you write about your collaborations with other artists, and she'd like to hear more about the collaborative process.
So,
I mean, maybe you could talk about it with Sheath Lab. Can
Oh,
you
that's
talk about it
great.
a little bit in terms of Shift Lab? Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be
so
good.
I think one of the things about the collaborative process that I'm most fascinated with, I don't write a lot about it. I've done some talks and things. I should write more about it because I have a lot of experience with different kinds of collaboration. So Lee Running, I've been working with her for almost 10 years. And she's one who did flat fashioning and lining. And then I have all these collaborations with SCAP and then also with my collective Shift Lab. And it's a group of 5 book artists that we got together and thought, well, what would it be like if we all worked together on something? And we were just interested in working together. Some of us knew each other better than others. And those projects are really great because we also have worked together for a while and each project is different. And each time we're trying to figure out how we as a disparate group of artists all across the country can come together and think and work on a topic or content for a book, even if we're not in the same place. So there's only been a handful of times that Shift Lab has actually all been together in the same place. A lot of times 3 or 4 of us can get together. And then sometimes we can Skype in another member. I mean, a couple of us have had babies during the times that we've been working. I was very pregnant one time when everybody got together and I couldn't travel. Sarah Bryant was in the UK for a while. So how do you build a team that is working across these distances, but really investigating really complex ideas? And each time we make something, we think of different ways of collaborating. For REF, our project that we just finished, it's an investigation on the reference section in the library and the changing physicality of the reference section, that we no longer go there and pull books off the shelf to find the information that we need. We turn to Google and the internet, but there's some lovely resonance in the books that are available in the reference section. And so for that project, the 4 of us gathered at the University of Alabama at Katie Baldwin's studio, and we created a whole series of dummies for that project. In essence, kind of how we would work here. We all came together it was like 3 or 4 days, and we really got into the guts of the project and created the dummies, and then went to our individual studios and created the individual pieces. So that book is about, I think there's about 20 different pieces that go into that edition. So we could go away and do the production in our studios, but then they all come back together. So we're really challenged by that distance. And it's been a really great experience working with all those amazing women. And I wouldn't change a thing. So.
At this moment, can you just now show us one of the Shift Lab and, maybe fill in some of that, the process?
Yeah, I'm going to show you Trace because I have that one here. I don't have Ref. I wish I had that one. That one's actually in my home studio at the moment. But I do have Trace, which is a great one to show based on what I just talked about in this idea of us being all over the country. So what we did is we each picked a place that was altered by man and humans and women that we could visit near our locations. So this is a giant map or key. Let's see if we can see all of it here. Sorry, you're gonna have to see my bit of camera. Let's do this. But here's a large map, and we've got the coordinates of each of the locations that each of the artists picked. And these red dots printed on the other side are the locations of each of the Shift Lab members. So you can kind of tell this is the United States over here. This is the UK where Sarah was. And so we had the different areas. So Katie Baldwin looked at the Redstone Arsenal in Alabama and created this piece. the garden, the trees, weeds, soil, water, air, and light. Oop, sorry. We might have run out of battery here. If you will bear with me 1 second, I will switch this out and keep going so you can see this. I think the battery's lit on this.
And this other woman, and they.
I like using this, I use a GoPro for some of these because it has such a wide angle to see. Let's see. But sometimes the battery dies on me. Hold on. There we go. Okay, back in business. So Katie, it's a 3,700 acre fenced in army post, formerly a chemical weapons manufacturing facility for World War II. As a civilian, I could not go into the arsenal. However, I walked along the fence that lies along the perimeter of the land. So we had a specific size. We all worked in the same size. And these all went into an envelope, folded box. But actually, I don't have the folded box with me today. I'm going to fold this one up because it just is a little distracting for the other ones. So here we have the one that I did, which is across state lines. And I make all those light things you can't see on the camera, but this is the Ocklackney clay mine in Georgia, a surface mine in Southwest Georgia that mines absorbent clay used for chemical processing and kitty litter. The clay is found in deposits trending northwest across the Florida Panhandle into southern Georgia. I traveled the 43.8 miles from my home to tour the mine, the same trip my husband takes across the state line every workday. So we've got some map images and these geologic cross sections that unfold as you traverse the distance from home to work. And another map on this side of the aerial view. A lot of these are taken from Google Maps and then translated into the topographic maps. And that folds up. There's a teeny tiny little cat here in the corner for the kitty litter. At the mine, they make kitty litter out of the clay. It's a big, it's an area down here that it's a region where they mine a lot of that clay for processing and also for kitty litter. We never had a cat, so we never really benefited from any free kitty litter though. This one here is Sarah Bryant. So she worked with the Brighton Marina in the UK, the largest marina in Europe, a strange space between land and sea. I immersed myself for months in the quiet rhythm of the place. Later revisited through newspaper clippings, promotional materials, and public notices dating to its design and construction in the 60s and 70s, printed using chalk from the surrounding cliffs. So this area down here, if you can see the white of the paper right there, that's chalk from the cliffs. Oh, okay, here's Trisha's. I thought I missed Trisha's. Here is Macy Chadwick, Taos Path, New Mexico. So a changing topography of cracked dirt, enormous anthills, rings of grass where cows once grazed, gnarled sticks, bright green grasses, and a variety of different sagebrush. I breathed in the wide open space and looked for patterns and repeated shapes in the landscape. So for Macy's also, and I love this part of it, pops up here as if you're going to see in the horizon, off in the horizon, the mountains.